I'm on my way up to the top of the mountain to do a little walkthrough of the property up here. Just thought I'd stop about halfway up and get a good shot of what the house property looks like from up here. I'm probably about 60 feet up from the yard at this point. Got a little ways to go yet to the top, but I joke about it being a mountain. It's really not that big. But anyway, that spot over there is where the garage will be. Yeah, it's just kind of what the house looks like. Actually, pretty decent view from up here. If there's a few more trees out of the way, you can see the mountain off to in the distance there, especially with the snow on the ground. All right, so I'm at the top where I initially had planned on building the garage. Just thought I'd do a kind of a walkthrough, show what my original plans were, some of these trees up here, just kind of what it looks like, maybe the road a little bit. So it's kind of hard to explain on a video, but right around here, I was planning on clearing out and just having like a big gravel area. I could get trailers in here, a camper, and turn it around. But the actual garage footprint, I'll try to roughly show you where it was going to be. About in here. At one point, my dad and I came out and staked it off. Got some transit, or got his transit out, put some stakes in the ground, and got all the elevation profiles of try to get a nice square 30 by 70 spot in here. And had a rough idea of how much dirt was going to have to come off this side and push down over the hill. I think it was around roughly 5 or 7 feet is going to be cut down on one side. But and I had all the trees marked out, which ones needed to go. Like I said, it's pretty extensive all the way back in there because I wanted to get a nice big turnaround area and make sure that the trees are down that can never hit the garage. So it was gonna be a way bigger footprint than just the garage in terms of the trees. So all of this stuff you're looking at here would have had to go. Including some of these big ones. I think these are red oak. It's kind of hard to get good perspective of it, but I'm gonna say that's a good 30-incher right there. And off the top of my head, 80 feet tall probably. This one, same way. Another one, another big one. Keep in mind, even the small ones are gonna be a lot of work to deal with. I was planning on burning a lot of it, taking a lot for firewood, and then just burning the rest in a big pile. Just too much to try to get it all out of here. This one here is the biggest on the property, and it had to go too, root system and all. And I haven't measured it, but I'm gonna say it's every bit of 6 or 5 feet, maybe 6 feet at the bottom. But it quickly tapers off, and it's probably 30 inches there, and then from there. But again, a monster. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 100 feet tall. Like I said, all that's going to get pushed over with a bulldozer and dealt with. Either burned, which are going to be gigantic burn piles, or some of it we dealt with for firewood. So over here is the neighbor. He's actually got a garage that's similar to what I was going to build next to his house, and it's right up against my property on that side. But the road was going to go, or my driveway I should say, right up through here. We had the center line staked out pretty good, but I've done pulled the stakes out on it. Right up through here. Again, a lot of these trees are going to have to come out just to make the driveway. I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 times as much trees as what I took out for my spot down there in terms of just size of them and the quantity. So the neighbor's driveway comes in right there down to his building. And I was going to cut some of these trees out, tie into the road. This is like a berm off the road. I'll walk down here in a minute and show you the road that was causing some concern, what it's looking like. But basically, it was going to go down. This is an incline down, probably 20 feet from the road down to the site. Not real steep, but a little bit of an incline. But as you can see, tons of hardwoods in here. A few ashes that have had the emerald ash borer situation that have fallen. Notice pretty much all the trees are affected with that, all the ashes. Got a survey stake right there. That's the corner of my property on this side. Here's something I'll notice too, is here's some dogs barking. He's got some hunting dogs over there, and I actually let him use my property to exercise them a little bit. He'll run them around in here and stuff. But anyway, yeah, I talk a little bit about the neighbor situation. That's something that is a concern, especially when you're outside city limits. Is your next door neighbor getting hunting dogs, 3 or 4 of them, sitting right beside your house and just letting them bark all day long. Those things bark a lot. Somehow, I do not hear them at all at my house down over the hill. But when you're up here, it's pretty noticeable when they get going, every time a deer runs by. And, you know, that's just another risk. Anytime you're outside city limits where there's no dog ordinances, and you got somebody that gets a wild hare to get some hunting dogs, and they just set them out back and let them bark nonstop. And personally, it's tough to deal with, especially when you're investing so much in your property, that just to have that happen and not even know when that could happen. You know, you might have fine neighbors now. Maybe they sell, maybe they got a kid that grows up and decides he wants some dogs. And again, that's just one of many scenarios that can happen. You know, decide they want to have a shooting range next door, which obviously I'm pro Second Amendment, do my own good bit of shooting, but there's a limit of how close you should be to somebody, and a lot of times they just don't care. Like I said, my last house, I was probably 200 feet from a neighbor that would just get out there and shoot AR-15s for an hour straight, and you just couldn't even sit on your couch. You know, it was just a little ridiculous. And again, very little control of that when you're outside city limits. That's kind of good news about my property down over there, is that my house is in city limits. The city limit line actually runs pretty much right through my property here. So where I'm standing is right outside, and then down in there is inside. And you do get some protections from stuff like that in the city. You know, they're going to come and deal with it if somebody's got dogs barking a lot or shooting. Obviously, you're not allowed to do inside the city limits that close to houses. But then once you're up here, it's just kind of the Wild West, just like anywhere outside city limits in West Virginia. So that's just something else to take note of. It I mentioned as a concern, and we looked at like what could happen in terms of people building stuff or neighbors doing something crazy like that. So anyway, that's a prime example. You know, there's people across the street from him up there, and no complaint about it. So like I said, luckily it doesn't impact me at all being down there. But anyway, just making a point. So I'm gonna walk up here and walk the road. I'm gonna cut out for a second and come back on and kind of show you. I'm not sure how well I'll be able to see the dip in there. That was a concern of washing out with the snow on the ground, but I'll walk up there and show you. All right, I'm up here on the road. Right now I'm facing my property that direction. Over there is the neighbor with the garage I mentioned. Here's kind of his driveway. Mine was gonna almost be the exact same setup, just cut down over the hill. We're gonna have to cut out some of this berm, but this is the road that is a private road. It's gravel, and the guy up here with the garage, I think, is the guy that maintains it the most. But when you look on the deeds, what it is it's actually a space that nobody owns. It's not a state road. Nobody owns it really. So like my property line comes up to one edge, this property line comes up to the other, and there's a 40-foot gap of abandoned property, I guess you could almost call it. Now on the deed it calls it a 40-foot road, but you know, you get on talking to the state, they don't know anything about it. And nobody seems to know who owned it 100 years ago, who deeded it to who. You know, you like to think that the fact my property touches it, that you got access to it, and I think it would boil down to nobody knows. But if somebody complained, there's a potential there that they could say, no, you don't have access to use that. And what would be really bad is if I got the garage done, everything up here, all my stuff, and somebody comes and says, we don't like you using that road, you can't use it, because there's really no other good way to get to this spot from that road, and that the sides over the other direction are way too steep. You know, it's just, there's no way. I mean, I guess there's a way if enough money and excavation, but very difficult to get a road down into there to somewhere else. That's just unfortunate the way the land's laid out that it's like that. So anyway, that was a major concern. And then of course there's the upkeep I'd have to help with up here. Not a lot, but you know, I'd probably have to pitch in for gravel and grading and all that stuff over the years, since I would be using it at that point. So the power line situation, I don't know if you can see, there's a line that runs through here, but this is a communication line. And the way this works is, if you got like a state road, which is most of the roads in West Virginia, unless you're in a city limit, is a state road. There's no such thing as a county road. The state has a blanket agreement with the utility companies to let them use the road as easement for like power lines. Well, when I bought this place, I thought this was just a state road. You know, you don't think much of it, and a road's a road, right? I mean, just never thought about it being private. And since it is not private, or it's not a state road, the power company has to get an agreement from the landowners to be on their property, which again is questionable because there is a 40-foot strip here that nobody knows who owns it. So you really can't even get agreement from those people since nobody knows whose it is. But my options were going to be to cut these trees out here in front of these houses and run all the way from that neighborhood down in there. The last power pole is probably 200 yards from here. So all those trees on the right of this road are going to have to come out. Again, that house in there, I'll walk past it here in a second, is abandoned. The one down there, I'm not quite sure who they are. The other option was there's a power line about 200 or 300 yards to the left up here, and then those trees are the ones that are in that front yard of that guy's house that would have to go. And they got to clear a 40-foot strip of trees down through there. And so they'd be running a power line power line that way just to get to here. And like I said, then I got to cut my own, depending on where we put the transformer, 20 feet or 40 feet wide down through there to blast all those trees out of the way to run my power pole. So that was my dilemma. Again, get all these people to agree to it, cut all these out. Again, they said that they would have to do the tree work, it sounded like, when I was gathering, at least to the transformer part of it. And then, of course, you never know who you're working with the AEP. I had an engineer come out here and talk to me. He seemed a little new to the job, so maybe he was wrong on that. Maybe I could cut them, but even if I could cut all those out, that would have been a massive job dealing with that, if I could even get an agreement from somebody, which again has plenty of its own challenges. Another thing I hadn't mentioned that was a little bit of a problem, but more or less just money, was to get water up here. There's actually a water line that runs into the ground here and a gas line, which is nice. I was gonna have to run that all the way down there, which is about 500 feet from here. I think I measured to the garage, and not the end of the world, but it's just more cost. You got to run all that line that far, and then on top of that, you got to pay a $500 fee to get tapped into the water. You got to pay a separate water fee every month for the rest of my life for the separate meter up here. Regardless, there's that fee on there just for having it. There was that cost going on as well, which again, kind of minor in the big picture, but another negative to building up here. How close I'll be able to get in front of these people's houses without them getting a little concerned who the heck I am. Like I said, this house here is abandoned. There's junk in front of it. I think there's talk they're going to come to demolish it here soon. Right in here is that slip area that has slipped over the years. And what it is, they bought like concrete blocks under the road here that are questionable in themselves. And this is actually my property down in here. That's the creek that runs down to my house over there. But you can see it's just a straight wall drop off there. And from talking to the neighbors, it slipped in back in the 90s. The fact that it was a private road, nobody could help them. They petitioned with like the county commissioner or something because they I guess couldn't afford to fix it themselves. And so somehow they got the county to come help for, I don't know the agreement there, but the neighbors up here told me that that whole situation, and that if I cause that to slip back in, it's my problem, which realistically it's kind of theirs too. But what they're saying is they're gonna hold me accountable. I don't know if that means sue me if I don't come fix it. But again, something like that can be very costly. Not to mention the fact that if it we were driving a concrete truck over it or something, a mixer truck, that thing's gonna be rolled down over the hill, which I guess that's the concrete company's problem. But either way, it could just be a disaster in there if that would fall. And again, it could be months to get somebody to come out and fix it. $50,000, I wouldn't be surprised, just some of the numbers I've seen on stuff. Meanwhile, these people have no access to their house. I think back in the 90s, whenever that fell in the first time, they had to just park way out there and walk for, I don't know, months, years back to their house in here. Because again, there's a couple down in there. So I was just concerned about that, and again, with the road, power line, all that, just to get started, and then all the excavation, all the tree work up here, it was just really getting out of hand for what I'm trying to do. Which, a lot of what I'm trying to do is just have a nice garage to work in, to work on my daily drivers, work on some motorcycles, store my Falcon. I don't have big plans of having a top fuel racing team where I need a huge garage and all that. Now, the one nice thing about up here was I was going to have access to bring a camper or trailer or something like that in. Where my house is now, it's difficult to get much in there. I can get like a dump trailer in there, probably a small camper, but pulling like my old 32-foot camper it's not gonna be possible down there Where up here, I could have got it in, down in there, turned around, all that. So that was one big plus with up here, that I had a way against all this. But at some point, how much is that worth? You know, is that worth whatever, 50,000 more to build up here, just so I can bring a trailer in? You know, I had to think about all that. And another thing too is I could always do something up here still yet. Even if it's just build a concrete pad in here to park a camper or something up here, I could technically do that. Again, be still quite costly. You got the other negatives of who's going to watch it up here, keep an eye on it, all that. But it's not like this is useless forever. It's just I don't think it was the best spot for ultimately what I was trying to do. So anyway, that probably gives you a better idea of some of the challenges I was dealing with up here. So I was walking back and thought I'd stop for a second and I mentioned just a couple more things. One, there's a tree right there. It's like a Y shape. I'll walk over here in a second and look at it. That is one that I like to try to get down at some point. It's hard to measure exactly, but I think it's within range of the house. It's leaning that way, and I'm just concerned it would ever come crashing down one day, tear the gutter up. I mean, it's not going to just crush the house, because it's, you know, it might be a 60, 70 foot tree, and it might be 50, 60 feet away. I mean, I think it would just be the tips of the branches that would smash it as it comes down. But one day I might have my friend come up and cut it down, you know, climb it, piece it down, and then do something with it. I either drag it down the rest of the way up the hill. I've thought about bringing my dad's tractor in here or something and just dragging it up in the woods and leaving it instead of burning a lot of that, taking some for firewood and just dragging the brush up here and letting it rot away. Just to make, you know, whatever's easiest. But it's gonna be a lot of work to get it out of the trees on the side of that hill, get it around the future garage to a burn pile. So I'll just do some analysis when it gets closer and see what's the easier path, but I got that to deal with. And something else I was gonna mention is I think about sometimes of this spot up here, up on the top where I showed you where the garage build is gonna go, would actually be a pretty decent house site if you can get past some of those issues that I had with the garage, being the road through there and the power and all that. Yeah, technically that's a pretty decent house spot. It's actually got a pretty decent view. If I cut some of the trees over here, you can look out and see the mountain over there, and you know, it's just a decent spot. Now you still got the neighbor next door over there with the dogs barking, like I mentioned, but you know, I think about that as, who knows, down the road I could maybe one day want to build there, if I hit the lottery maybe, and or maybe one of the kids want to build there. I could, you know, give it to them and be, you know, right close to us. So that is a nice thing about it. Technically I could sell it if I ever came to it. I'd really hate to do that and have somebody that close to me. The guy over there with the dogs mentioned that he'd been trying to buy it for years and wanted to buy it off of me. I told him, not interested. That's the last thing I need. I didn't tell him that, but the last thing I need is him setting up his new kennel over here right above my house. And the whole point of me selecting this site was to avoid some of that. So yeah, no way I'm selling it to him. Probably won't sell it to anybody. And it's probably not worth that much. I don't even know off the top of my head, but probably not enough to make it. I wouldn't want to lose that space between me and people, just the general use up here of it. Who knows, I may want to set up a little dirt bike track up here one day. I mean, there's still some uses for it, even though I'm not building the garage up here. But anyway, just want to point that out, that it's a pretty decent house spot. And I think if you had a larger budget, some of those issues that I mentioned would be less of a problem. Is when you're trying to do all that on top of the house you're trying to pay off and upgrade, and you're trying to build this garage. But if that was your main focus, was just building a house, some of those problems get to be a little bit smaller of an issue financially and all that. So anyway, just thought I'd point that out on the way back down.